Hello, hello! Welcome back to another month of favourites. It's October. That's ridiculous. Anyway, strap yourselves in because we've got a few regular favourites and then lots of book favourites again. Although not as many as August. So to begin with, I've got a TV show. It's Taskmaster season 15. I finally started watching it this month. I've not finished it. I think I'm about halfway through, but I'm very much enjoying it. It's a good season as well. And now on to my books. I've got 11 this month. And they're not all audiobooks, so that's a win. The very first one I have is Erebus by Michael Palin, and I'm going to pass over to Past Me so you can see what I had to say about that. Hello, I am coming to you from the second week of September, and I have just finished reading Erebus by Michael Palin. I am so sorry about my pronunciation of all of that. I think just from the get-go, the thing I struggled the most with this book was just the title. Erebus is the name of a ship, and it's what this book is about, obviously. And the name comes up an awful lot, and I could not, in my head, you know when you're trying to read it, and you just don't know how to pronounce it, and it was really annoying me. So that was probably the main thing about this book. This is the first, physical book I've read, I think, since May. Oh no, that's not true. I did read Where the Crawdads Sing as well. But Where the Crawdads Sing, I did also have an audiobook version, whereas this is the first one I've literally just read a physical copy of in a very, very long time. And it was so nice. Also, I just love the colours of this cover. I think it's so beautiful. But to sit there and just, read through the pages, I just love it. Now, the way I got my hands on this book, I know this is going to be a long video, but deal with it, is, as you may have worked out by now, I am working on a ship. And on this ship, we have a, library, which is mostly built up of books that people have left behind. But someone came up to me the day before they left and said, "Can I give you this book to put in the library, please?" And I said, "Ooh, what's it about?" And they said, "It's about a ship." And I was kind of like, well, I gathered that much. And they told me, well, basically they just handed it to me and I read the blurb. And this ship was the first ship to reach as far south as it did of the world. And then it went on a second tour expedition and everyone just disappeared, the ship disappeared, and no one knew what happened until 2014. And I'm not spoiling anything, that is literally the blurb. And this is her story, as it says. Now, one thing I don't like is I don't like ships being referred to her. So that was another little irk, but that's a silly little thing. And I felt like I was really lucky because this woman who gave this book to me said, "Oh, it's a great book and it's non-fiction." And as soon as I heard non-fiction, my ears sort of picked up. Because as you might know by now, I'm really trying to read more non-fiction and I don't really know where to go to find good non-fiction. And I've read some really good non-fictions this year, and as I said, I am going to try and do a ranking at some point. But I don't think I would have ever come across this book if it wasn't for this woman, so thank you to her. And basically I ended up saying, I'll read this, and then I'll put it in the library. And I recommended her The Woman They Could Not Silence, which was the book I'd just finished at the time. And I think she gave this to me a couple of days before September, and I had it on my desk waiting until the 1st of September to start reading it. And it did take me longer than my audiobooks, but it still didn't take me very long. I think it took about a week. So not bad, to be honest, especially considering I'm working full-time. I loved how well researched it was. I loved how detailed it was. On the flip side of that though, I do feel like, especially at the start, I felt like, do we really need to be talking about all of this in such detail? There were bits that I just thought, I don't know if this needs to be in the book. But then equally, I loved having that detail. And I think, you can see how much research has been done, and I really appreciate that. And again, there's direct quotes from things that I just love. And in the middle, I don't know if you can see those white strips. There are pictures, and every chapter has a picture as well. And I love that. So I did struggle a little bit with how dense it was and how much information there was. But then on the flip side, I did like that as well. One thing I really didn't like was these pictures that are in the middle kind of spoiled bits for me. And I mean, look, you know how it's going to end. You know it's going to end with the ship disappearing because that's what happened. And then it obviously gives you a resolution as well. I loved the way the resolution was done though. I did really like that. But still, there are little plot twists and things that I think these pictures in the middle either should have been spaced out better or I don't know, I just felt like it was a shame that I saw a picture and I knew what was going to happen. So for future reference, I wouldn't if I were to recommend this book, I would say skip over the picture bits until the very end and then come back to them. I was kind of surprised though, because a good chunk of this book is just references. Like the last 20 pages are references. So I got to the end and I was like, oh, I thought I still had 20 more pages to go. I liked that it felt like a story. I mentioned this in last week's video, not last week, last month's. One of the things I've noticed when I'm trying to read, oh, we're going under a bridge. There we go. One of the things I've noticed is that I like to read non-fictions that don't feel like essays, they feel more like stories, which is why I struggled with like the Icarus Deception. And this did feel more like a story, and I appreciated that. I said earlier that I liked the resolution, and I did, but equally there was a bit that I felt like it kind of ended abruptly. But I don't know. I did enjoy it. I think I gave it a 3.5 or a 3.75 on Goodreads. Not Goodreads, Storygraph. I've not used Goodreads in a very long time. Which might not sound like a great score, but for the kind of non-fiction because the problem is, I'm not that interested in ships. I love travel, and I'd love to go to Antarctica and to like Canada and the north of Canada as well. Like, I love that stuff. So that was a big part of the book that I really enjoyed. And like the way he was talking about the different destinations. And what I also really loved is that like you learn about a lot of this in school and in history and whatever, but you just kind of hear overall stories of things that happened. But this just made it feel so much more real, and like, oh yeah, there was a world where like maps weren't perfect and people had never gone to Antarctica. So I really enjoyed that. But I'm not that fascinated about how a ship works, which is ironic, or like the size of it. I can't picture that. So that's why I did struggle with a little bit of this, because it was just a bit boring to me. But then the other stuff was really interesting and kept me hooked. And like I say, I finished this in about a week, which is very decent considering I'm working a full-time job and it's a paperback as opposed to an audiobook. So that's my very long review of this book. And now over to future me to deal with the rest of the favourites, which I don't even know what they're gonna be. Isn't that exciting? I love it. And now I'm gonna go put this up in the library. Over to Raquel. The next book I read was an audiobook, and it was This Is How It Always Is by Laurie Frankel and read by Gabra Zachman. This book was beautiful. This is a book that I think everyone should read. It's about a family with a child who is questioning their gender, and the child is still quite young and no one really knows what to do about it, and it shows the struggles and the support and what happens, and it was just a very warm, good book, and I highly recommend it. Next, I read another non-fiction, The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. This has been basically, when I first heard about it coming out, I'm a really big John Green fan, but when I first heard about it coming out, I thought, I don't like non-fiction. But as you know by now probably, I've really been getting into non-fiction this year. And I kind of had this revelation to myself where I was like, wait, this is like the perfect non-fiction book to read. I like John Green. And then I had to wait ages for it to be available, but now it was available and I loved it. Literally basically my only fault with it was that it wasn't long enough. It finished and I just kind of looked at my phone. I thought, no, there's got to be more. But it really captured the way I feel about the world, and it was informative. You learnt things from it, and it was well written, of course it was. And it just ticked all my boxes. Next, I read Containing Big Tech, which was another non-fiction, and this was one that I got an advanced reader's copy of from NetGalley again. NetGalley is a service that provides advanced reader copies of ebooks and audiobooks in exchange for honest reviews. So I will have a full review going up about it later on in the year, but I did really enjoy it. I think it was very informative, very sort of active, and it gave you actual solutions for things. And I think it's definitely a book everyone should read. So tick, tick, tick. The next one I read partly in physical copy and partly as an ebook. Oh, and in fact, actually, sorry, The Anthropocene Reviewed was also read by John Green, and then the Containing Big Tech was by Tom Kemp and read by Dave Clark. And the next one that I read was The Interview by C.M. Ewan. And the audiobook version was read by Georgia Maguire. At the start, I loved this book. I was totally hooked, although it did frustrate me in bits. I was like, no, don't do that. But I did really enjoy it, and there was a lot of sort of mystery about it that I liked. But I felt like the end wasn't warranted. I don't know. I think my main problem was that this all happens like over the course of a night, and there were too many near misses and too many moments where I thought, Basically, it was trying to build a suspense because she can't escape, and you know she's unable to escape. And yet, there's so many times where it's like, almost, and it just didn't feel exciting because I was like, well, it's not going to work. And there were a couple of characters that I was like, oh, well, I knew this was going to happen. But then equally, there were moments that I was like, wow, that's come out of nowhere. So, mixed feelings about this one. I think I gave it a 3.75, I believe, but I did enjoy it, so I would recommend it. Next, I read Till We Meet Again by Lesley, Pearse and read by Samantha Womack, because it was another audiobook. And again, I have mixed feelings about this one. Overall, I did really enjoy it, but there were moments that I was like, no! But I did enjoy it. Then I went back to a non-fiction, and that was I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jennette McCurdy. Now, again, this is one that I've heard lots of really good things about, but I was like, I'm not gonna read it. I don't care about non-fiction. And now here we are. I loved iCarly as a kid, and I loved Victorious and all that, Sam and Cat. And for those of you who don't know, Jennette McCurdy is the one who played Sam. And you also might know that I am in the performing industry. I am an actress, a singer, all that jazz. And I love reading and seeing about the behind the scenes. So I decided to pick this up because I'd heard really good things about it through YouTube, and I loved it. I thought it was such a good read. The book itself was really digestible. It was all really short chapters. There were like 100 and something chapters, but it was very easy. This one was another audiobook, and it was read by Jennette McCurdy, and there were weird things happening with the audio, which I don't know if that's down to production or if there was something wrong with my iPad. But aside from that, I thought this was such a good book. It was heartbreaking and interesting, and it just really makes you feel for Jennette. And yeah, I loved it. And then another non-fiction, The North Korea Journal by Michael Palin and read by Michael Palin. So obviously my first book was by this author, and it was a physical copy. But when I had the physical copy, I looked up to see if I could find an audiobook version of it as well. And I couldn't, but instead a whole bunch of other books came up. And I am fascinated by North Korea. I'd love to visit it one day myself, but also, I don't want to die or be stuck there. So reading a book is the way to go. And it was just really interesting. As I say, I'm very fascinated by North Korea, so yeah, I can't really say anything more than that. But what I also liked was that in the book, when he went to North Korea, it was around the same time as when he was writing Erebus. So I liked the few references that were in there about that. Because I was like, hey, I read this book. So yeah, I liked that one. Next, I read another NetGalley book, and that was The Family Guest by Nelle Lamar and read by Cecily Bednar-Schmidt and Lynn Norris. I liked it, I didn't love it. I had very mixed feelings about this one as well. And again, there is going to be a review going up later on in the year about it. Now, I read another non-fiction and another physical one, and that is A Gypsy in Auschwitz by Otto Rosenberg. And this one, I have a feeling someone handed to me. Either they handed it to me or it was in the library upstairs, and I was inspired by it. The truth is, being Jewish, I try to consume a lot of World War II media. I think it's so important to sort of be immersed in it and be aware of what happened. Not that I'm not, I mean, my family lived through it, but I don't want to say I like reading books about it, but I do. So I saw Auschwitz and I was like, yes, but then, coming from the Jewish perspective, that's all I've ever really sort of heard about. That's the only story I mostly hear. Obviously, I know it's not just affected the Jews, but those are the stories I hear and read and consume the most. I hear very little about gypsies. So this was really interesting. I think it was a shame that it didn't delve into more what a gypsy is and how, they talk about a split between the Sinti and the Roma, but I don't know what that means, and they didn't really cover that in here, which I think is a shame. I wish there'd been a bit more sort of backstory about gypsies and the two different types, and well, maybe there's more than that. I really don't know. But aside from that, this was a very good book. It was very easy to read, I thought. Obviously, it's absolutely harrowing and horrible, but it wasn't sort of hard language or anything like that. And it actually felt quite simple in a way, because I think it's been translated from German. But yeah, it was heartbreaking and interesting and very good. So, would recommend. And finally, to finish off the book side of things, I read The Cat Who Saved Books by Sosuke Natsukawa, translated by Louise Heal Kawai and read by Kevin Shen, and I am so sorry about my pronunciations. This book has been on my to-read list for a very long time and has not been available in my library app. And it finally became available on like the 27th of September, and I was like, right, I have a few days to read this, and it's only 5 hours, so I should be all right. And I finished it on the 29th of September, but I finished it. This was a very sweet book, very easy, very light, very predictable, but it was just sweet, heartwarming, nice. It was about a book, it was about a cat. What more could you ask for, really? So yeah, I enjoyed that. Okay, a few more things to talk about. I've got one in my music category, and I have no idea how this came up on my Spotify, but there is a song called Heartbeat, and the reason I pronounced it that way is because it's spelled H-A-R-T, because it's a Dutch song, and it was sung, the version I found anyway, was sung by Rein van Duivenbode and Fijn van den Bosch, and it's just a nice song. I liked it. Then I've got one thing in the food category, which I'm going to go get for you, one moment. I've got some bad news. I think I ate it. It's these Mozart chocolates from Austria, and basically it's an outer layer of chocolates, then inside there's a bowl of marzipan, which I love and used to adore as a child especially, but then inside the marzipan there is more chocolate. And the first time I bit into it I was a bit like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this, but now I love it. So, would recommend, and apparently I love it so much that I ate the one I had saved for my favourites. Oh well. And finally, this is one I'm very excited about. I was told about a website about a week ago called I'm going to link it down below. And basically, from what I've understood, I'm still sussing it out a little bit, but from what I've understood is you can post pictures on there and you still retain the rights to them, but through the website they can be sold. And if they get sold, you get like a 50-60% commission, but you still retain the rights at all time, and you can also like take the pictures off whenever you want or take them off the market. As I say, I'm still kind of figuring out how it works, but I love the idea of it. I've always been a big fan of taking pictures, especially of nature, and I've always loved the thought of being able to sell those pictures, because apparently, according to some people, I do have a good eye for things, but I've also never wanted to go through the hassle, A, of getting a camera, and B, of finding platforms to sell pictures and how it all works. I don't understand it. So the fact that this platform exists and it's basically like Instagram but you can sell your pictures, absolutely perfect for me. So as I say, I've linked that down below because I am very excited by it. And then just to round off my monthly favourites, I'm going to talk about my song of the month, which this month is a reggae version of I Will Always Love You. I don't know who sings it, I don't know where it's from, but I've heard it an awful lot this month, like about 4 or 5 times a day. It's probably starting to drive me a bit mad, but it's cool, so Google that, see if you can find it. And after a very long time of me chatting to a camera, I'm gonna finish this favourites here. Let me know your favourites of the month down below. If you like books or things like that, please feel free to subscribe, because I talk about books as well as many other things, travel, photography, nature, all that jazz, so feel free to stick around. And I will see you all very shortly in the next video. In fact, oh no, that's not true, I thought it was November already. Don't rush, Raquel. Time's already moving too fast. But thank you very much, and I will see you all very, very soon. Goodbye!